So, um, ever get passed over for a promotion by that one person who does like half the work, but somehow magically always manages to take the credit?
Oh, yeah. We all know that person.
Right. And you're just sitting there fuming, wondering how they keep getting away with it while you're grinding away in the background.
Mhm.
But what if they aren't just lucky? What if they're actually playing a 3,000-year-old game and you don't even know the rules to it?
Well, that invisible game is exactly what we are dissecting today. We are looking at a framework that, honestly, completely strips away our modern, polite sensibilities. It treats human interaction like a high-stakes, ruthless chessboard.
Yeah, so welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to decode this notoriously controversial, insanely popular playbook of power, influence, and strategy. We are basically looking at the mechanics of amoral power.
Right, and we're drawing on a massive stack of sources for this. We've got historical biographies spanning from Renaissance Italy to ancient China, modern sociological research papers, game theory, mathematical models, and even algorithmic trend analyses.
It's a lot. And just to give you a vibe check on the cultural footprint of this material, this is a philosophy that is beloved by hip-hop legends. It is absolutely banned in prisons and, secretly read under the desk by Fortune 500 CEOs.
Yeah, it is polarizing by design. I mean, people either treat it as the ultimate survival guide or like a manual for sociopaths.
Exactly.
But whether your goal is to conquer your industry or maybe just protect yourself from a toxic colleague who keeps stealing your ideas, or just understand why people act the way they do when status is on the line, you really have to understand the anatomy of these dynamics.
So we're going to break down what works, what completely backfires, and the psychological levers behind all of it. But here's the crazy part to me. The guy who synthesized this definitive guide to ruthlessness, he didn't start out as some, titan of industry or a Machiavellian political mastermind.
Not at all.
He started out as a broke, deeply frustrated history nerd.
He really did. And his origin story is a masterclass in the very laws he ended up writing about. So back in 1995, the author was holding a degree in classical studies, and he estimated that he had worked something like 80 different odd jobs.
80. Like 80.
Yes, 80. We are talking construction worker, translator, magazine editor, Hollywood movie writer. He was just floating.
So he's like the quintessential burned out creative.
Pretty much. He felt completely stuck, ground down by the system, and generally unhappy with his whole trajectory. But the pivot happens when he's in Italy working at an art and media school, and he crosses paths with a book packager.
Okay, so how does a burned out writer go from Italy to writing the ultimate guide to power?
Well, he had been obsessively rereading a biography of Julius Caesar. Specifically, he was fixated on the psychology of Caesar's decision to cross the Rubicon River.
Which is, for those who don't know, that ultimate point of no return moment that ignited a civil war and changed the Roman Empire forever.
Exactly. And he recognized a pattern in these historical pivot points. Power wasn't about morality, it was about positioning, timing, and just an absolute willingness to act.
Right.
So he pitches this raw concept to the packager, who essentially tells him, prove it, write a treatment.
Which is a massive gamble, right?
Yeah.
Because he's finally in a somewhat stable job in Italy. And to write this treatment, he has to risk his own livelihood. He basically has to cross his own personal Rubicon.
Yeah, he takes the leap, writes the treatment, and it snowballs into this massive international cultural phenomenon. Millions of copies sold, translated into dozens of languages.
It's wild. And the core premise he landed on resonated because it removed the moral judgment from success and failure. He argued that power is like gravity or electricity. It's just a force.
Right. It doesn't care if you're a good person or a bad person. By synthesizing the tactics of Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, and P.T. Barnum, he created a unified theory of how people acquire this force and how they weaponize it.
But the audience adoption is the most fascinating paradox of the whole thing to me. You've got Hollywood executives keeping it on their nightstands, which, okay, makes sense.
Sure.
But then you look at the music industry in the early 2000s, you have this massive embrace by hip-hop icons like 50 Cent, Jay-Z, Drake. Why does a rapper who survived the crack epidemic of the 1980s find a survival manual in a book quoting 16th century Italian diplomats?
It's such a good question. And the connection lies in the transition from physical warfare to psychological warfare. 50 Cent's relationship with this material is the perfect case study.
Yeah, didn't he actually co-author a book with the guy eventually?
He did. Think about 50 Cent's early life. He survived the literal physical dangers of the streets. I mean, he was shot 9 times.
Yeah, it doesn't get more physically dangerous than that.
Right. The environment was hyper-violent, but the rules of engagement were entirely transparent. If someone was your enemy, they showed you their weapon. If someone wanted your territory, they came for it overtly.
So the threat matrix is entirely visible. You know exactly where you stand and who wants you dead.
Exactly. But then he transitions into the corporate music industry. And suddenly, he finds himself in boardrooms with Ivy League educated executives who shake his hand, offer him a cappuccino, smile warmly, and promise him the world. All while drafting contracts designed to legally rob him of his masters and his autonomy.
Oh, wow. It's like politeness is a predatory camouflage.
That is precisely the phrase for it. The deception was masked by corporate etiquette. He couldn't figure out the puzzle of the boardroom because his street survival instincts were calibrated for overt threats, not, covert manipulation.
That makes total sense.
So when he absorbed these historical laws, it decoded the camouflage. It explained the exact mechanics of why the executive was smiling while setting a trap. It gave him a strategic framework to outmaneuver them without ever raising his voice. It became a translation matrix for corporate warfare.
That reframes the entire playbook. It's not necessarily an instruction manual for becoming a tyrant. It's like a pair of night vision goggles for navigating an environment where everyone is hiding their true intentions.
Exactly.
Which perfectly explains why it's one of the most heavily banned books in the United States prison system.
Oh, absolutely. Many state penitentiaries ban it entirely, classifying it as a severe security threat.
The irony there is staggering. Like, it's required reading in a private equity firm, but it is literal contraband in a cell block.
Because the people running the prisons understand the mechanics of power just as well as the people reading the book. The prison system relies on an artificial, rigidly enforced hierarchy.
Right.
If inmates learn the psychological mechanics of forming invisible factions, concealing their intentions, turning guards against each other, or systematically undermining authority without breaking explicit rules, the entire control structure collapses. Power truly is a universal language, and those who hold it are terrified of those below them learning the grammar.
So, okay, if we are going to learn the grammar, let's look at the first crucial step. The foundational layer of this entire philosophy seems to be about managing the illusion. You can't wield power if people don't perceive you as powerful.
Right. Managing perception is the barrier to entry. And the very first law in the framework, never outshine the master, is also the most frequently violated, usually by people who think their raw talent will save them.
Oh, the King Louis IV thief story is the ultimate cautionary tale here.
It is the perfect mechanical breakdown of ego. So in 17th century France, King Louis XIV's finance minister was a man named Nicolas Fouquet. Fouquet was a prodigy. He was wealthy, charming, impeccably dressed, and highly ambitious.
The guy had it all.
He really did, and he wanted to secure his position as the indispensable right hand to the king. So, to prove his absolute loyalty and his unparalleled value, he throws a party at his newly constructed chateau.
And this wasn't just like a dinner party. He basically threw the 17th century equivalent of the Met Gala, the Super Bowl halftime show, and a royal coronation all rolled into one.
Oh, it was insane. He commissioned custom plays from Molière. He had fireworks. He had the greatest chefs in all of Europe. He thought he was signaling to the king, look at the caliber of the man who serves you. Look at my taste, my connections, my brilliance. You need me.
But he massively miscalculated the psychology of his audience. He thought competence would breed appreciation.
Yes, he fundamentally misunderstood the fragility of absolute power. King Louis XIV demanded to be the absolute center of the universe. I mean, he literally styled himself as the Sun King.
Right, the sun revolves around him.
Exactly. So as he walked through Fouquet's gardens, eating his food, listening to people praise Fouquet's taste, the king didn't feel supported. He felt deeply, existentially overshadowed. He realized his own minister lived in a grander house and threw a better party than he did.
Which, if you're an absolute monarch whose entire authority rests on the illusion of divine supremacy, is a systemic threat. You can't have a subordinate looking like a better king than the king.
No, you can't. So within weeks, the king's bruised ego morphed into paranoia. Fouquet was arrested on highly dubious charges of embezzlement, and he spent the remainder of his life rotting in solitary confinement.
Wow, just for throwing a good party.
The mechanism here is universal, though. When you try too hard to impress those above you with your raw talent, you inevitably inspire fear and insecurity. You have to actively manage your competence so that your masters always appear more brilliant than they actually are.
I see this exact dynamic play out in modern corporate structures constantly.
Huh?
Like a young, incredibly sharp junior analyst comes into a strategy meeting, completely dismantles a failing project, and proposes a brilliant solution right in front of the CEO.
And they think they just secured a promotion.
Exactly. But the middle management boss sitting next to them just had their incompetence highlighted in neon lights. Fast forward 3 months, and that junior analyst is getting sidelined or managed out for not being a culture fit.
It happens every day. The ego of a middle manager is functionally identical to the ego of a 17th century monarch. If you trigger their insecurity, they will use whatever structural power they have to eliminate the source of that feeling.
Which leads right into the mechanics of Law 4. Always say less than necessary. Now, as someone who talks for a living, this concept absolutely terrifies me.
Well, it violates our modern instinct to constantly communicate. But the psychological mechanism of silence is incredibly potent. Brief, vague statements create a vacuum, and human beings cannot stand a psychological vacuum.
Well, we absolutely panic. I mean, if I'm negotiating a contract and I state my terms and the other person just looks at me and says nothing, this silence physically hurts. My brain starts screaming, they hate the offer, they're insulted, I need to fix this.
Yep, you start spiraling.
And before they've even opened their mouth, I'm bidding against myself, I'm lowering my price, I'm just babbling to fill the void.
Because you are revealing your hand. Their silence forced you into a state of reactive anxiety. When you speak less, you force others to project their own insecurities and intentions into the space you left empty.
That is so manipulative, but it works.
It does. Furthermore, the more you talk, the more common you appear. Words have an inflationary effect. The more of them you print, the less each one is worth. By rationing your words, you artificially inflate their value.
Okay, but how does that square with the mandate to build an empire? Because you also have laws that essentially command you to guard your reputation with your life and court attention at all costs.
I know, they seem opposed to silence, but they actually work in tandem. Obscurity is professional death. If people don't know you exist, you have absolutely no leverage.
True.
You look at someone like P.T. Barnum in the 19th century. He understood the mechanics of the attention economy before the phrase was even invented. He knew that the market doesn't differentiate between good attention and bad attention. It only differentiates between attention and invisibility.
He would literally write anonymous letters to competing newspapers, viciously attacking his own exhibits as frauds, just to manufacture outrage.
Yes.
He essentially invented the modern outrage cycle because he knew angry people will buy tickets just to see how angry they should be.
Exactly. He monopolized the public's bandwidth. But once you have that attention, once your reputation is secured, you deploy Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor.
Now, this is where I struggle with the framework a bit. In modern psychology, we talk a lot about the mere exposure effect, like the idea that people develop a preference for things merely because they are familiar with them.
Yeah.
The more I see you, the more I like you. But this law demands the exact opposite.
Well, the mere exposure effect works for building comfort, sure, but comfort is the enemy of awe. If you want power, you don't want people to just be comfortable around you. You want them to revere you.
Okay, I see the distinction.
In economics, value is driven by scarcity. If a resource is infinitely available, its price drops to zero. Your physical presence and your accessibility are resources. If you are always in the room, always answering every email within 30 seconds, always available for every mundane meeting, your perceived value plummets.
You just become part of the furniture.
Exactly. By strategically stepping away, by becoming temporarily unavailable, you force the market or your peers to realize what it's like to operate without you. You force them to talk about you in your absence, which elevates your mythos.
So the perception strategy is a highly calibrated dance. You defer to your boss's ego to protect your flank. You use silence to force your rivals to reveal their insecurities. You manufacture spectacles to capture the market's attention. And then you just vanish just long enough to make them realize they need you back.
You are essentially playing director, lighting designer, and lead actor in your own psychological theater.
Okay, but theater only gets you so far, right? At a certain point, the playbook shifts from playing defense and manage your image to actively, aggressively taking territory. Let's look at the dark arts of strategic maneuvering.
This is where the framework abandons all pretense of morality and embraces pure Machiavellian mechanics. Let's take Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Let me push back on this entirely. Like, if I'm launching a startup, I am going into the trenches. I am going to face brutal hours and existential stress. The conventional wisdom is that I need to surround myself with people I inherently trust. I want my best friend as my co-founder. Hiring a former competitor or someone I actively dislike feels like sneaking a Trojan horse into my own company.
I get it. Your logic makes perfect sense on paper, but it completely ignores the messy reality of human emotions, specifically the emotion of envy. When you hire a friend, the dynamic is fundamentally asymmetrical. They remember you when you were equals. Now, you are attempting to assert authority over them.
So they feel, entitled to leniency.
Not just leniency, they feel an implicit ownership over your shared history. When you have to reprimand them or deny them a raise, it doesn't just feel like a professional boundary, it feels like a personal betrayal.
Oh, that makes sense.
Friends working under you often become resentful, spoiled, and quietly tyrannical. They expect favors, and when they don't get them, the emotional fallout destroys the working relationship anyway.
And the enemy is better because the expectations are lower.
The psychology of the enemy is rooted in redemption. If you take someone who was previously working against you, or a rival who has been defeated, and you offer them a lucrative position or a gesture of mercy, you completely short-circuit their expectations.
Probably shocked you didn't just crush them.
Exactly. They have no illusion of friendship. They know they are on thin ice, therefore they have everything to prove. An enemy will often work twice as hard and be infinitely more loyal because their survival in your ecosystem depends entirely on proving their newfound worth.
It's the psychology of a rescue dog versus a purebred puppy. Like, the purebred expects the luxury. The rescue dog is intensely loyal because it remembers the pound.
That is a harsh way to put it, but mechanically, yes.
That is incredibly cynical, but I see the leverage. Okay, what about Law 7? Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. This is the one that makes people viscerally angry.
It violates every modern standard of workplace fairness. But power doesn't care about fairness. It cares about energy conservation and leverage. Thomas Edison is the quintessential example here.
Yeah, we hold Edison up as the lone genius in his laboratory, the singular inventor of the modern age.
But Edison was a systems architect, not a solitary tinkerer. He employed teams of brilliant, overworked engineers, including Nikola Tesla for a time.
Right, poor Tesla.
These men were doing the grueling trial-and-error physical labor. But Edison owned the laboratory. He owned the patents. He controlled the flow of capital and the media narrative. By taking the results of dozens of brilliant minds and presenting them under the singular brand of Edison, he projected an aura of godlike productivity.
I mean, if he had tried to share the credit equitably, he would have just been seen as a competent manager of a smart team. By hoarding the credit, he became a myth.
And myth generates far more capital than managerial competence. He conserved his personal energy for strategy and fundraising while siphoning the intellectual labor of his subordinates. And while you are siphoning that labor, you must simultaneously deploy Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you.
Oh, this is the IT guy who refuses to document his code.
Yes, the absolute ruler of his domain. If you want true freedom, you cannot be dispensable. If anyone else can do your job, your market value is dictated by the lowest bidder.
Makes sense.
You have to actively engineer a situation where your superiors or your clients rely entirely on your specific, localized knowledge for their survival. You make yourself the only viable bridge between them and their goals. You never teach them enough to cross the river without you.
That makes me sweat just thinking about being on the other side of it. But let's look at the most aggressive offensive tactic in the book. Law 15. Crush your enemy. Totally.
This law is steeped in the blood of Renaissance Italy. The author relies heavily on the history of families like the Medici in Florence.
But why does it require total annihilation? If I beat a competitor in the market, if I take 80% of their market share, haven't I won? Why do I need to bankrupt them and salt the earth?
Because a partially defeated enemy is the most dangerous entity on the board. If you humiliate a rival, take their territory, but leave them with enough resources to survive, you haven't neutralized a threat. You have simply given them a singular, obsessive life purpose, destroying you.
Wow, you basically weaponized their resentment.
Exactly. A wounded enemy has nothing left to lose, and they will wait patiently in the margins, recovering their strength, waiting for you to show a moment of weakness. The Medici understood that exile wasn't enough. You had to strip the rival family of their wealth, systematically dismantle their political alliances, and remove them from the board so thoroughly that they could never formulate a counterattack.
And in a modern context.
It means you don't just win the contract, you systematically dismantle your competitor's reputation and supply chain so they can't bid against you next year.
I feel like we're building a psychological profile of a Bond villain here. Let me throw one more at you that feels a bit more subtle. Law 40. Despise the free lunch.
It sounds like financial advice, but it's actually about the psychology of reciprocity. What is offered for free is inherently dangerous. It is a trap designed to bypass your rational defenses.
Because human beings are hardwired for reciprocity, right?
Yeah.
If someone gives us something, we feel a deep, almost biological discomfort until we repay the debt.
It's the hidden obligation. When a vendor takes you out for a massive, expensive steak dinner, or a rival company offers you free access to their software tier, they are practicing philanthropy.
Right, they want something.
They are buying your future compliance. They are injecting a subtle guilt into your relationship so that when they ask for a massive favor 3 months later, your psychological defenses are compromised.
So you pay for the free steak with a multi-million-dollar contract.
Exactly. By paying your own way, by insisting on paying full price for what you consume, you stay clear of gratitude and guilt, you maintain your strategic independence, you owe no one, and therefore no one can leverage your emotions against you.
Okay, but look at this cocktail we've just mixed. I'm supposed to hire the guy who tried to sabotage me, steal my intern's brilliant marketing strategy, ensure my boss doesn't know how to log into the database, completely bankrupt my industry rivals so they lose their homes, and reject a free donut in the break room because it's a mind control device?
When you list it out like that,
I mean, if I actually live like this, I might be powerful, but I'm going to be completely isolated and exhausted. Does this actually work in the long run? Because it sounds like a recipe for a massive coronary and a team that absolutely hates you.
that is the exact pivot we need to make. We've looked at the historical theory, now we really have to submit it to a scientific reality check. Does human psychology actually reward this kind of sociopathic behavior over a 30-year career?
I have to imagine the science pushes back hard against some of this absolutism, like take law 4, say less than necessary. If I try to be the mysterious, brooding shadow figure in a modern creative brainstorming session, I don't look powerful. I look incompetent. My boss is going to pull me aside and say, "You aren't contributing to the team. We need to let you go."
And empirical research completely validates your intuition on that. In organizational psychology, there is a concept that directly challenges Law 4. It's known as the Babel hypothesis of leadership.
The Babel hypothesis. That sounds like a dig at podcast hosts. What is the mechanism there?
Researchers set up group problem-solving environments and tracked the emergence of natural leaders. They wanted to know if the group enlisted the person with the highest IQ, or the person with the most domain expertise, or the person who spoke the most profoundly.
And the result?
The result was consistently correlated with sheer vocal volume. The person who emerged as the recognized leader by the group was overwhelmingly simply the person who talked the most.
Wait, really? The quality of the ideas didn't matter, just the quantity of words.
Quality matters as a baseline filter, like if you are speaking absolute nonsense, the group will reject you. But assuming a baseline level of competence, the human brain associates vocal quantity with confidence and influence.
That's wild.
The person who speaks frequently dictates the pace of the conversation, frames the questions, and anchors the group's attention. Silence in a modern collaborative environment isn't read as mysterious power. It's read as a lack of processing speed or a lack of engagement.
That is a massive blow to the Machiavellian lone wolf theory. Okay, what about Law 2? The idea of betrayal and using enemies. If I am constantly betraying my friends and manipulating alliances, doesn't that eventually catch up with me?
To understand the math of betrayal, we have to look at game theory. Specifically, a massive, highly influential study conducted in the 1980s by a political scientist named Robert Axelrod. He was fascinated by the evolution of cooperation and wanted to know mathematically if pure selfishness was the optimal strategy for survival.
How do you even test that mathematically?
Axelrod set up a tournament using a framework called the iterated prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, he invited game theorists, economists, and computer scientists from all over the world to submit computer programs. These programs would play against each other thousands of times. On every turn, a program had to make a choice: cooperate with the other program for a mutual, moderate reward, or betray the other program to steal a massive reward for itself.
And if the laws of power hold true, the program that is the most ruthless, the most deceptive, the one that betrays its partner the fastest, should dominate the tournament.
In a single interaction, betrayal almost always wins. But this was an iterated tournament. They played thousands of rounds against the same opponents.
Yeah.
And the program that won the entire tournament, overwhelmingly destroying the ruthless programs, was incredibly simple. It was submitted by Anatole Rappaport, and it was called Tit for Tat.
Tit for tat. How did it operate?
It only had 2 rules. Rule 1, on the very first interaction with a new player, always cooperate. Give them the benefit of the trust. Rule 2, on every subsequent turn, simply copy whatever the other player did on the previous turn.
So if I cooperate with tit for tat, it cooperates with me forever and we both get rich.
Yes. But if you try to pull a Machiavellian betrayal to steal the reward, tit for tat retaliates immediately on the next turn. It punishes you. It is not a pushover.
But does it hold a grudge? Because if I crush my enemy totally, like the playbook says, I never trust them again.
That's the genius of the program. If you betray it, it retaliates. But if you decide to go back to cooperating, tit for tat instantly forgives you and goes back to cooperating on the next turn. It is nice, retaliatory, and forgiving.
Why did that specific algorithm beat all of the sociopathic ones?
Because constant betrayal creates an unsustainable transaction cost. The ruthless programs eventually ran out of gullible victims. They ended up playing against other ruthless programs, and they just destroyed each other in endless cycles of retaliation, earning 0 points.
Wow.
Tit for Tat won because it built highly lucrative, long-term alliances with other cooperative programs, while effectively neutralizing the aggressive ones. It proved mathematically that in long-term ecosystems, like a 30-year career cooperation, overwhelmingly beats constant betrayal.
That completely reframes the utility of the book.
Yeah.
It means pure ruthlessness is actually mathematically suboptimal. What about Law 1? If I have a brilliant idea, is it really career suicide to outshine my modern boss?
Again, modern structural data pushes back on the 17th century anecdote. Harvard Business Review looked at modern managerial advancement. They found that managers who actively highlight the talents of their subordinates, who champion their junior staff and let them shine, actually see significantly higher promotion rates for themselves.
Because the modern corporate structure isn't an absolute monarchy. It's a matrix. If my team is producing brilliant work, the executives above me don't think my team is better than me. They think I am an elite talent incubator.
Exactly. A modern leader's power is derived from the aggregate strength of their network. Hiding your talent only protects you if your boss is a wildly insecure tyrant. If you are operating under a competent modern leader, hiding your light hurts the team's output, which ultimately hurts your own leverage.
So we have organizational psychology telling us to speak up, game theory telling us to cooperate and forgive, and management science telling us to share the spotlight. It sounds like human biology and mathematics violently reject these laws. Is the entire playbook just dark psychology marketing? Like a way to make average corporate drones feel like James Bond while they fill out spreadsheets?
It's not just marketing, because the dark side of human nature is undeniably real. But the true mastery of this framework is calibration, not dogma. If you act like a ruthless prince every single day, you isolate yourself and your transaction costs skyrocket. The most powerful people in the modern world understand how to use these laws defensively.
Ah, defensively.
Right, they use them to recognize when someone is running a tit-for-tat betrayal on them or trying to make them dependent while relying on genuine cooperation to build their long-term empire.
You use the Machiavellian toolkit as a shield when someone pulls a knife on you in a negotiation, but you don't walk into a collaborative design sprint swinging a broadsword.
That's the perfect distinction. But before we completely sanitize these laws and pretend we live in a post-ruthless utopia, we have to look at the one modern arena where these brutal laws are not just surviving, but thriving on a global scale.
Let me guess. Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley and the architecture of the modern digital economy. We haven't abandoned the 17th century royal courts. We've just traded marble floors for server farms. The tech giants play this game with terrifying efficiency.
Okay, let's look at a case study. How does a company like Amazon deploy these laws and power?
Jeff Bezos' strategy in the late 1990s and early 2000s, specifically regarding the publishing industry, is practically a textbook execution of these dynamics. He started with Law 6, court attention at all costs.
Right, because before Amazon was profitable, before the logistics were fully dialed in, Bezos branded it Earth's biggest bookstore.
Exactly. He engaged in massive media campaigns, deliberately running at a massive financial loss just to monopolize the public's bandwidth. He normalized the behavior of buying online by making Amazon synonymous with the internet itself.
He commanded the spotlight so thoroughly that competitors looked like regional novelties.
And once he had the attention, he deployed Law 11, keep people dependent on you. He built a distribution network and a customer interface so frictionless that the consumer base migrated entirely to his platform.
And how did the publishers react to that initially?
Oh, at first, they celebrated. Amazon was moving unprecedented volume. They were making money hand over fist. But they failed to realize they were stepping into a dependency trap. Once the publishers were relying on Amazon for 40, 50, 60% of their revenue, the trap snapped shut.
The leverage flipped.
Right. Bezos had the leverage. He began demanding deeper wholesale discounts, aggressive co-op marketing fees, and longer payment terms.
And if publishers said no, like if they pushed back on the margins?
He deployed Law 15, crush your enemy. Totally. But he did it invisibly. Amazon didn't issue angry press releases, they just tweaked the interface. If a publisher didn't agree to the new terms, Amazon would quietly remove the buy button from that publisher's books.
Wait.
Or they would change the shipping algorithm, so a book went from prime 2-day delivery to usually ships in 4 to 6 weeks.
Which is an absolute death sentence in e-commerce. If I have to wait a month for a book, I'm just going to buy a different book. The publisher's revenue goes to zero overnight, and the consumer doesn't blame Amazon. They just think the book is out of print. It's algorithmic warfare.
It's power executed perfectly. Amazon used data and scale to crush opposition without ever raising a sword. This reality has forced modern business strategists to adapt the historical framework into what we can call the founder law's survival rules for the digital economy.
I love this concept. Give me the first founder law.
Let's call it Law 49. Own your data, own your destiny. In the historical examples we talked about, the ultimate source of power was land. If you owned the physical terrain, you controlled the food supply, and therefore you controlled the people. In the 21st century, data is land.
So if I build a massive e-commerce business entirely on Amazon's platform, or I build a massive media brand entirely on YouTube,
you are a serf farming on a king's land. You have the illusion of power, but absolutely no leverage. The king can change the tax rate or the algorithm tomorrow, and your entire livelihood evaporates. True digital power requires building your own data moats.
like having direct access to customers.
Exactly. You need proprietary user emails, your own billing infrastructure, your own analytics. You must own the terrain beneath your business.
That makes incredible sense. If you are renting your foundation, you can never truly build a fortress. What is the next founder law?
Law 50. Control the narrative against the algorithm. In the royal courts of Europe, power was dictated by the king's mood and court gossip. Today, attention and relevance are dictated by opaque lines of code. If the algorithm buries your content, your product, or your resume, you functionally cease to exist in the marketplace.
So the algorithm is the new, deeply unpredictable King Louis XIV. We are all just dancing in the digital court, performing whatever trick it demands this week, terrified of getting our digital heads chopped off by a shadow ban.
That is the exact dynamic. You have to court the algorithm relentlessly. You have to feed the machine the formats it favors, whether it decides it wants short-form vertical video, high-engagement text threads, or AI-generated summaries. You bend to the architecture of the machine just to maintain your visibility.
It's exhausting, but if obscurity is death, the algorithm is the gatekeeper of life. Let's look at one more founder law that maybe offers a bit more hope.
We can look at an adaptation of Law 22. Turn weakness into strength, or the surrender tactic. In the tech ecosystem, pure resource dominance isn't always possible, but constraints actually breed the most lethal innovations. A brilliant modern example is the creation of Slack.
The enterprise messaging app. I mean, they basically own corporate communication now.
But they didn't start out trying to overthrow corporate email. The company was originally called TinySpec, and they were trying to build a massive multiplayer online video game called Glitch.
A video game.
Yeah, and the game was failing. They were bleeding cash, the user base wasn't growing, and they were staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy. That's the ultimate weakness.
So how do you surrender to that and win?
You look at the ashes and see what survived the fire. While the game itself was a failure, the team had built a highly efficient, quirky internal chat tool to coordinate their remote developers while trying to build the game.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The founder, Stuart Butterfield, realized the game was dead. He surrendered to the failure. But he recognized that the internal tool was a weapon. They pivoted the entire company, packaged the chat tool, launched it as Slack, and turned their catastrophic weakness into a multi-billion-dollar platform.
They didn't fight the death of the game. They harvested its organs.
So the mechanics of power in the modern economy rely on digital sovereignty, owning your data algorithmic compliance to stay visible, and aggressive adaptability.
The arena has shifted from marble floors to fiber optic cables, but the levers of leverage are identical.
But, it's not just the corporate giants adapting these rules. The digital age has birthed entirely new and highly controversial internet subcultures based on these exact philosophies. We have to talk about the Sigma male phenomenon and the metapolitics of TikTok. This is a fascinating sociological shift because it takes high-level concepts of statecraft and distills them into digital identity markers for adolescents.
Exactly. Over the last few years, our feeds have been flooded with Sigma male content. And the primary audience consuming and creating these millions of videos isn't middle-aged executives trying to get a promotion. It's 13 to 17-year-old boys.
To understand the mechanics of this trend, we need to objectively look at the taxonomy they're using. For decades, pop psychology leaned heavily on the concept of the alpha male.
Right, the alpha was the extroverted, socially dominant, loud leader of the pack who derived power from his position at the top of the hierarchy.
Exactly, and the Sigma male is constructed as the dark alternative to the alpha.
The Sigma is portrayed as the lone wolf. He exists outside the hierarchy entirely. He is highly ambitious, rigorously disciplined, but deeply cynical and completely self-centered. He doesn't want to lead the pack. He wants to operate in the shadows, entirely self-reliant.
And the algorithmic packaging of this archetype is highly specific. These short-form videos heavily utilize funk music, which is a dark, distorted, bass-heavy subgenre, and they sync it to specific cinematic imagery. The most ubiquitous visual avatar for the Sigma male is Patrick Bateman, the character played by Christian Bale in the film American Psycho.
Which is a staggering irony. American Psycho is a dark, satirical critique of empty 1980s yuppie consumerism, and Patrick Bateman is literally a hollow, insecure serial killer.
He is. But when you strip that 25-year-old movie of its narrative context and shot it into a 15-second visual loop, the character represents something entirely different to a 14-year-old scrolling on their phone.
Right.
Bateman represents the ultimate practitioner of amoral power. He is impeccably dressed, financially successful, completely detached, and entirely unaffected by the emotions of the people around him.
He becomes a visual shorthand for invulnerability. But this isn't just an aesthetic trend about wearing nice suits and going to the gym. University researchers have actually dug into the data on these videos, and the psychological mechanics being promoted are really concerning.
Sociological research analyzed hundreds of these viral Sigma male videos to identify the core thematic patterns, specifically regarding how they instruct young men to interact with the broader social world, and particularly with women. The researchers identified a distinct, escalating four-part funnel: disinterest, rejection, humiliation, and hate.
Break down the mechanics of that funnel for me. How does it start?
It begins with disinterest, which is essentially a warped application of the laws regarding absence and emotional control. The algorithm heavily rewards videos showing a woman attempting to engage a man and the man completely ignoring her. He stares blankly ahead, entirely focused on the grind or his own thoughts. It frames emotional detachment and social isolation not as a deficit, but as a superpower.
So it teaches that acknowledging another person's humanity is a strategic weakness.
Yes. From there, the algorithmic reward system pushes the content creator to escalate to capture attention. Disinterest becomes active rejection, where the Sigma figure actively denies social connection. This escalates to humiliation, where the Sigma asserts dominance by mocking or putting down others who show emotion.
And the final step.
And at the bottom of the funnel is hate, which veers into outright misogyny and the total devaluation of others.
But why does the algorithm reward this specific escalation? And why are millions of teenage boys so hungry for this hyper-isolated worldview?
Sociologists view this trend as a response to a broad crisis of masculinity. We are living in a period of intense cultural transition. Traditional patriarchal norms are being deconstructed, gender dynamics are shifting rapidly, and the economic pathways that previous generations relied on are highly unstable.
It's a highly ambiguous environment. The old rules are gone, and the new rules are confusing.
And nature abhors a vacuum. When young men feel lost, anxious, and stripped of a clear social script, they search for an anchor. The Sigma male archetype, fueled by the amoral laws of power, provides a ready-to-think framework. It serves as a psychological defense mechanism against the anxiety of the modern world.
It tells them, you aren't confused and lonely. You are a strategic lone wolf. You don't need to do the incredibly hard work of navigating complex emotional relationships and societal shifts. You just need to shut off your empathy, acquire power, and ignore everyone else.
It allows them to reassert a feeling of dominance and control under the guise of self-improvement and emotional invulnerability.
The mechanics of that are fascinating, but the real-world application is chilling. A text meant to explain the high-stakes political maneuvering of Renaissance kings has been fed into a digital engagement algorithm, and it's spitting out a behavioral filter for teenagers that teaches them to treat their peers as obstacles.
It perfectly illustrates how media doesn't merely reflect our culture. The architecture of the platforms actively shapes human behavior by incentivizing our darkest impulses for watch time.
So to truly understand the danger of taking this playbook out of context, we have to look at the original blueprints. We need to look at the grand strategist the author drew from and see where the modern interpretation has entirely lost the plot. Let's compare Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, and the modern application of power.
This is where the vital context lies. Let's start with Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince in the early 16th century. Machiavelli was a diplomat in a hyper-volatile Italy, full of warring city-states and constant existential threats. He held a deeply pessimistic view of human nature. He believed humans were inherently selfish, fickle, and greedy.
He wasn't writing inspirational quotes, he was writing survival protocols.
Exactly. He argued that to maintain control, the prince must be willing to use deception, break promises, and set conventional Christian ethics entirely aside. However, and this is the crucial mechanical difference, the ultimate goal for Machiavelli was never the personal enrichment or the ego of the prince. The ultimate goal was the stability, security, and glory of the state.
The end justified the means, but the end was preventing your city from being burned to the ground by a foreign army, or preventing a bloody civil war that would slaughter thousands of peasants. The ruthlessness had a collective purpose.
Precisely. The burden of leadership meant dirtying your own soul to protect the populace. Now contrast that with Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese strategist who authored The Art of War.
Which is the favorite quote book of every aggressive hedge fund manager in Manhattan.
Which is a massive misreading of the text. Sun Tzu was deeply influenced by Taoist philosophy. He did not view warfare as a glorious pursuit of dominance. He viewed war as a catastrophic drain on resources, an ill omen, and an absolute last resort.
So what was his primary mechanical goal?
Tactical efficiency. Sun Tzu famously wrote that the greatest victory is the one that requires no battle at all. The goal was to win through superior intelligence, psychological positioning, and adaptability. You maneuver your opponent into a position where they realize fighting is hopeless, so they surrender.
Without losing any troops.
Right. You do this to preserve the state intact, because if you have to burn a city to the ground to conquer it, you've inherited nothing but ashes and the cost of rebuilding.
So Machiavelli says use ruthless deception to protect the state from chaos. Sun Tzu says use psychological positioning to avoid physical conflict and preserve resources. They are both writing high-level manuals for grand statecraft. They're dealing with literal life or death scenarios for thousands of people.
And here is the fatal divergence with the modern adoption of the playbook. What modern culture has done is take these brutal existential tactics designed for managing empires and deflecting armies and applied them to micro-level, everyday interpersonal interactions.
You are applying the rules of siege warfare to the weekly marketing department status update.
Exactly. We are using the tactics of a Medici prince facing assassination to deal with a coworker who talks too loud on Zoom.
It's the ultimate disproportionate response. It's like taking the launch codes for a nuclear submarine and using them to win a game of Monopoly with your family. You might win the game, but you're going to destroy the house.
And that is the ultimate danger of absorbing this framework without critical contextual thought. If you adopt this amoral posture in everyday life, if you treat every colleague as an enemy to be crushed totally, if you constantly try to keep your partners dependent on you, if you view vulnerability as a weakness to be exploited, you might achieve a certain kind of sterile dominance. But you will systematically destroy the trust, goodwill, and psychological safety required for a functional human life.
You in the boardroom, but you become a king of ashes. You rule over a ruined ecosystem of your own making.
The required contextual awareness is knowing the difference between a high-stakes survival situation, where a bad actor is actively trying to destroy your livelihood, and you must use these laws as a shield, and a standard collaborative human environment where cooperation is the mathematically optimal strategy.
Okay, this has been an incredible journey through the deepest, darkest alleys of human psychology and strategy. Let's pull it all together. Give me the high-yield summary of the mechanics we've uncovered today.
Number 1. Power is fundamentally amoral. It is a force of physics in human relationships. Understanding its mechanics is absolutely essential for self-defense, even if you choose not to deploy the tactics offensively.
Number 2, perception dictates reality. Guard your reputation, court attention to avoid the death of obscurity, and control the narrative by managing your presence and your silence.
Number 3, beware the transaction costs of pure ruthlessness. While the idea of crushing enemies and betraying allies sounds definitive, empirical game theory and management science prove that in long-term iterations, cooperation and trust building overwhelmingly beat constant betrayal.
Number 4, in the digital economy, the terrain has shifted, but the laws remain. Your proprietary data is your land, and your relationship with the algorithm dictates your survival. Build your moats.
And finally, number 5. Be hyper-aware of how these ancient theories of statecraft are weaponized by algorithms and internet subcultures. Do not let a historical survival manual warp your reality into an isolated, toxic echo chamber.
Beautifully synthesized. Now, before we sign off, leave us with something to chew on. Give us a final brain bender based on the text.
Consider the final law in the framework, Law 48. Assume formlessness. The directive is to be completely adaptable, like water. You must blend in, reflect what others want to see, and never give your enemies a solid, predictable target to attack.
Sounds like the ultimate defense.
It is. But think about the mechanical endpoint of that philosophy. If everyone in the world perfectly mastered these laws, if we all spent our entire lives studying each other, assuming formlessness, hiding our true intentions, and wearing perfectly crafted masks, would true power eventually cease to exist entirely? Because society would just become a massive room full of formless mirrors reflecting absolutely nothing back at each other.
Just an infinite hall of mirrors with nobody actually inside. That is a haunting concept to end on. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Stay sharp out there, guard your data, understand the game being played around you, and you know what? Maybe go buy your coworker a coffee today. Pay for it yourself, no hidden obligations, just to keep the algorithm guessing.